when you get into a growth stage company and really start to scale, one of the biggest things I've learned, as this is my first company that's grown to this stage, is you win with clarity and process accountability. So as that feedback loop gets bigger, as you add more stores, more production capacity, more employees, you've really got to have a clear accountability structure on who's doing what. Roles can't be unclear. You've got to empower your leaders. And, as the founder, one of the hardest things for me is like, you can't be in every single decision.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 132 of High Spirits. I'm Ben Larson.
And I'm Anna Ray Grabstein.
She's there.
I'm here.
Yeah. All right, well,
yeah. I'm supposed to say hi. I forgot. I'm not used to it. What'd you guys say?
Happy Tuesday, everyone. It's March 31st, 2026, and we've got a great show for you today, of course. We have Boston Dickerson on, the founder and CEO of Show Me Organics. We're going to be talking about all things Missouri, Kentucky, and beyond. But before we get there, Anna Ray, how's the last week been? I'm back in Berkeley. Happy about that. I was in Chicago last time we talked.
Yeah, the week has been going really good. I've been super busy with work and also family stuff over the weekend. And yesterday I had a funny experience. A friend told me, I don't know if you guys have heard, but Eddie Bauer is in bankruptcy, legacy clothing brand we all grew up with. And there's an Eddie Bauer store in my town. So she was like, it's 80% off. You should go. The whole store is on sale. And I went down there and I picked up this shirt that I'm wearing, guys. Not really that exciting, except that it's a hemp shirt. And it is 80% hemp, 20% cotton. And I got it at this crazy closeout, 80% off. And I thought, what a bummer, man. Eddie Bauer finally is like bringing forward some hemp clothing. And they're also going out of business. So
I remember when I was a kid, my wealthy friend, I thought he was wealthy at the time, his parents had a Ford Explorer, and it was the Eddie Bauer edition, and it was imprinted in the leather head seats, and I thought that was really fancy. But
I mean, it did get me thinking about these brands that we think are here to stay forever and how nothing is really forever. And there is a constant evolution. And we're even seeing it in cannabis. And we'll talk about it a little bit today with some of the interesting dynamics that are going on in Missouri. Is that some brands that have done well in other states haven't done well in Missouri. And these things that we think are so valuable, ultimately it's like the business still has to be healthy, and whatever was going on at Eddie Bauer, they just couldn't pull it off anymore. I think that they're maybe going to still exist online, but all stores in the US are closing.
Wow.
Interesting. But yeah, anyway, how was your weekend?
Not just cannabis, huh? Weekend was good. I was recovering again, like from my trip to Chicago, which was really great. It was the CSP Daily News. CSP Daily News is a publication in the convenience store sector. They're tightly tied to the NACS, and we talked about that a little bit on the show. But I got to close out the event on stage with a fireside chat with Jigar Patel, JP, as he goes by. And he is the chairman of political action for the National Association of Convenience Stores. And on stage, he was giving his express support for the hemp initiative this year, and also directly to the Coalition of Adult Beverage Alternatives, of which I'm on the board, led by Diana Eberlein. And it was just one of those moments where I realized, like, we've really made some headway in building these bridges to other industries, and to have them be leveraging the power of their PACs, their political action committees, their network of stores. They have over 150,000 doors across the U.S., and thinking about how to engage the customer at the point of sale and creating tap to learn or advocate or send letters to legislators. And I think it's so exciting that we are now being able to leverage beyond the proverbial four walls of hemp and cannabis, and like kind of breaking into these larger communities. And it makes me really hopeful for actually getting some traction, albeit at the same time, we're kind of uh, at the moment there's not clarity on how we drive this forward this year, because there hasn't been a bill that can really move forward yet, right? Everything that's been put on the table has been kind of dead in the water. So, yeah, kind of pumped after all that, trying to drive that momentum forward and making sure that we're putting words into action and really leveraging those offers to assist.
We have passed the 100-day mark on the announcement that Trump gave to begin the rescheduling. On December 18th, President Trump signed an executive order directing Attorney General Pam Bondi to move cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 in, quote, the most expeditious manner. But as of today, about 102 days later, nothing has been finalized. And on Friday, Representative Steve Cohen from Tennessee sent a letter to Bondi and to the DEA Administrator Terry Cole demanding a status update. The DEA has yet to set a briefing schedule. Trump's executive order does not set a deadline, and legal experts say the agency will still need to resolve or cancel an earlier appeal from the Biden era administrative process before fast tracking a final rule. And meanwhile, the Office of Management and Budget is scheduled to start reviewing some type of proposal, even though there is no current administrative law judge assigned to the process after the former one resigned. So this is really complicated. Ben, what do you think?
I I think it's just par for the course with our federal government, especially when it comes to the FDA and the DEA. It's like they don't want to see cannabis legalized. Like it's very clear, and I think this just pops up in every conversation, especially when we're talking about pathways for legalization, be it hemp or cannabis. Like there's this big push to try to minimize the influence of the FDA and certainly the DEA. And that's why I think people propose the TTB as the regulating, the preferred regulating agency in this case, because at least we know they have effective economies running under their purview. I think this is going to be the persistent struggle as we get through this, and that's why I don't get super excited about the prospect of even Schedule 3 getting even closer to moving through, because the rulemaking process feels like it's just going to take forever.
Yeah. Well, I think what I want operators to hear is that rescheduling is not your business plan. It might happen this year, but it also might not. So, uh, if relief arrives, it's a bonus, but it's not going to be a lifeline here, guys. And the companies that are going to win are the ones that are going to figure out how to be profitable with 280E. So just focus on that, my friends. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's all those tax bills eventually will come due, so might as well start paying them down now.
which the news of the day is MJ Biz Daily published an article saying that the MSOs together owe the IRS $1.6 billion in unpaid 280E taxes. And it's more than 40 cannabis companies, but MSOs, including Curaleaf, Trulieve, Verano, and Cresco, have withheld their 280E tax payments, betting that rescheduling would retroactively relieve their obligation. And the collective tab is now over $1.6 billion. And as part of a court case that's happening in New Mexico, the IRS has already started to arguing that 280E and rescheduling will not wipe out past due liabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, man. Trulieve alone has 630 million in this uncertain tax position, and Verano is at over 300 million. I saw in the New York Times this morning that Palantir has been hired by the IRS to come in and to create AI agents to create more efficient audit and penalty processes inside the IRS. And so maybe it isn't just bureaucrats anymore. We're up against the robots,
Can,
which is pretty scary.
can Palantir focus first on making an AI to do my taxes and then like go help the government enforce them? Because that would be wonderful, being that it's tax season.
It is, and it's a painful time for sure.
Mm.
So yeah, this is pretty wild, just watching all of these unpaid taxes build up. And there are businesses that are paying them, and then there's businesses that aren't. And it tends to be the small independent operators that I talk to that are all paying these taxes because they don't have complex tax strategy lawyers trying to get them out of them. And it just creates even further competitive divides in terms of the cost of operations when your competitor down the street is not paying their taxes and you are. Feels very
Yeah.
unfair.
Maybe our guest today can talk about that dynamic a little bit.
Oh, let's do it. Well, so our guest today is Boston Dickerson, the founder and CEO of Show Me Organics, one of Missouri's most recognized vertically integrated cannabis operators. Boston and his brother, both with roots in science, entered Missouri's cannabis market in 2018 and have built a company that spans 6 retail locations under the Blue Sage dispensary banner and a top-ranked wholesale brand portfolio, including brands Vivid, Missouri's Own Edibles, and Buoyant Bob, and a cultivation operation that they acquired from Holistic Industries. Today, the company employs over 350 people and has launched in Kentucky as well, one of the newest and most mysterious to me medical markets in the country. So we're really excited to talk with Boston today. He's raised a lot of capital to pull this off. He's creating all kinds of unique operational systems in order to scale. And he's just the kind of operator that we love having on the show to show us and teach us about building something real in real markets in real time. So, Boston, thank you so much for joining High Spirits. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for having me. Looking forward to a good conversation today.
Awesome.
Well, Show Me Organics. The Show Me state is Missouri. My former business partner Austin Stevenson used to always talk about the Show Me state. Let's start there. What's different about Missouri? Like, what's the mentality of Missouri? How does Show Me show up in how you run a business or how the market runs itself?
Yeah, I think to start, people from the Show Me state have a lot of pride in where we're from. We're known as a flyover state on the coasts. And I believe that's what gave our cannabis market a good advantage and head start out in front of a lot of these other programs that you've seen develop across the country. So I was born and raised here in Missouri, just south of Kansas City in a small town. My brother, the same. We went to the University of Missouri, both studied biochemistry, and I got into the entrepreneurship route, and Montana went the chemical engineer academia lab route. And in about 2018, we married our skill sets together and kind of had a crazy idea to apply for some cannabis licenses. And that's what we did. And we were lucky enough to get our foot in the door with initially 2 retail dispensary licenses in Southwest Missouri. And we've just kind of grown from there. So I think we employ a lot of values that we were brought up on in the Show Me state and in scaling, doing good business and making sure that we're really focused on the consumer first.
Born and raised in Missouri, but both named after places not in Missouri.
Yeah, that's right. So my dad's middle name is Montana. Montana is the firstborn, so he got my dad's middle name. And then they always loved Boston as a name and the geography and places around it. So they decided to stick with the tradition and continue the geography names. So.
I love it.
Really fun. Well, so Missouri's market has been a market that other state onlookers have thought seemed very healthy. The market hit 1.5 billion in retail sales in 2025. And along with that, when you look at the average price per product and all the different form factors and the average revenue per door of retail stores, a lot of signs really point to it being a healthy market for the operators inside of it. Although, the story has been complicated. And I'm wondering if you can give us your perspective on how the market has developed, what's worked well about it, what's been challenging, and kind of the dynamics that are at play today.
Yeah, again, with us being kind of a flyover state, I don't think a lot of the bigger players in the industry really looked at the Missouri market as something that was going to blossom into what it has. But originally, there was a group of people, and our trade association here did a good job of bringing key stakeholders together in the regulatory process to make sure that there was a limited number of licenses in the state, but still enough to have plenty of capacity and plenty of access to these patients. And the current market conditions, again, I think people catch up outside of the state 6 months to a year after what we're feeling in Missouri, just being boots on the ground. So now that dynamic has shifted. Early on, there were limited licenses, high margins. We went rec fairly quickly. I think within 2 years of the first product being sold medically, we had already voted recreational cannabis in, which I believe was the fastest state to transition from medical to rec. So that brought a lot of interesting things with it. A lot of capital came into the state. A lot of people built out these crazy facilities with huge cultivation capacity and bought the equipment to be able to process all of that weight that was coming down. And then pretty quickly, supply outpaced demand. And I think that's still true to this day. From my calculations, it's 1.5 to 2x supply to demand right now. So what that's really led to is the power shifting to these retailers. So the retailers have a lot of the power in the market, not outside, not to say that's unique to Missouri. That's happened in a lot of other markets. I think it just happened a little bit more quickly here as consolidation ramped up and retail buying power concentrated. So now we are starting to face some of the pricing pressure that a lot of these other markets have seen for years. And you say all of these metrics, AOV and basket and those things, while they are up, supply and demand is still the main driver of consumer packaged goods. So there is a lot of pricing pressure out there. If you don't have a brand that has really got in with the consumer base and built a loyal following on reliable quality products, it is tough for somebody new to break into the state right now.
I want to push on that a little harder, Ben, before you
Yeah, go for it.
So one thing that you're talking about is the complexity of non-vertical operators to compete and get on the retail shelf. And we have been following the case that is happening in Ohio, where the state's attorney general is suing a group of cannabis companies for what they're calling price fixing. And in Missouri, I've been following as some pretty large operators and established brands, Stizzy, a big one, MiraMed, have chosen to actually exit Missouri. And it seems that there is this real structural challenge in Missouri for non-vertical operators to get on shelf. And people talk about the reciprocity deals that are basically these handshake deals between retailers to carry each other's products. I'm wondering if you think that is what's happening, or if it's truly about consumer demand. Kind of what is the complicated dynamic that people need to understand about why it's been so hard for these big brands to break in?
Yeah, I can't necessarily speak to other national brands and their ability or inability to get on shelves here, but we really don't look at the reciprocity as dollars in versus dollars out. we look at how we can drive more revenue for your stores and let sell through really drive what sells. I think we're at a point where the Missouri market is matured, while still growing. We're continuing to sell more units at lower prices. So these consumers have started really voting with their feet. And if you don't carry the brand that a certain consumer wants, say in the most competitive market in the state, which is Congressional District 1 or 2, the St. Louis area, those consumers have 60 options within a 25-mile diameter that they can go access those products. So
Hmm.
it has turned into you've got to carry what the consumer wants. While there is some pricing power with the bigger retailers in the state, uh, again, we don't get to make the rules to how this stuff rolls out. I just try to learn the rules the best we can and play by what we're given. So our biggest focus over the last 4 years, we started from 2 retail stores and no cultivation, no manufacturing. So we built the vertical a bit backwards, and I think that has helped us, scale efficiently and still make sure that we've got the right things that we're focused on up front. So yeah, the last 3 years and the next 2 years will be focused on expanding our retail footprint in Missouri to make sure that um, we are able to stay above whatever dynamics do change in the market. If that's more licenses, if that's less licenses, if that's hemp being accepted in convenience stores and gas stations around the state. I'm not banking on any regulations or lawsuits or anything to change my business model. My goal as the CEO is to try to build a sustainable platform business model within the regulatory environment that we currently live in. And I've kind of had tunnel vision on that, whether good or bad. I think it's served us well in not thinking if or what if.
It does make me wonder if the pride element comes into kind of the purchasing patterns. Like, is there a more of a focus of the consumer on locally grown brands versus the Stizzies and others coming from the outside as like an 800-pound gorilla? I know we see this in markets like Minnesota, where there's a very mini grown kind of, well, that's an actual brand name, but I do think it's like a phrase. There's like mini grown products, and you go into restaurants and bars and you'll see not the obvious products being offered, and it's because they're local, right? So kind of an interesting dynamic. And also, as we think about the future of like interstate commerce, how it does always create this opportunity to have brands that go local and deep and have their rooted base there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Ben. And I believe that's one of the things we identified early on. I brought a chief marketing officer on in 2022. So really just after we'd launched and had our SKU selection and hadn't really even built our brand portfolio out yet. That's one of the first things that he identified when he came on. Big shout out to Tony if Tony's listening here. But uh, we noticed that consumers do gravitate towards Missouri products, and they are very prideful in the state and the state's offering. So that's how we came up with the Missouri's own edible brand, which is we use local flavors, fruits, organic things that go into organic inputs that go into our product to make sure that we do have that bit of differentiation. And I don't think this is atypical in Missouri from other markets. It's not like Supreme or Off White have their biggest revenue stores in Missouri. It's typically a coast thing. So I think it's similar for the Stizzies and some of these big brands is people don't play into the hype a whole lot here. And especially when you come with a similar offering to what somebody in state is already making at a higher price point, then it's really going to be hard to crack those loyal consumers.
Mm-hmm.
Another dynamic in Missouri that we've got to talk about is hemp. Missouri also has a lot of hemp retailers, and they don't have the same regulatory oversight as your stores. the adult use market has been doing well in Missouri, but the Missouri cannabis industry is um, frustrated and pushing back. And there is a House bill uh, that was or is supposed to ban intoxicating products by November of this year. And I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about your perspective and the dynamic in the state with intoxicating hemp.
Yeah, it's been an interesting one, and going back to my personal philosophical feeling on this matter is that hemp and cannabis shouldn't be fighting each other. I think we're part of the same industry, and I truly believe that more access to products, whether it be in a Price Chopper, our local grocery store here, or a convenience store, can add a layer of convenience and access for people who may not want to go and shop in a dispensary, or people who are just getting into the product category. Um, but if we're going to operate in the same sandbox, I believe we need to play by similar rules, especially when it comes to safety, testing, consumer transparency, regulations. It's one of the hardest things to swallow for me is regulators in Missouri. While I think they do a great job, and I think we've got a well-run program here and good leadership at the DCR level, they're scrutinizing everything about our operation down to, like, if you can have large MG versus lowercase mg on your packaging, and they'll run recalls or not let you put that product into market if one little thing is off on your label or packaging. Meanwhile, I've got a store right next to my dispensary who's selling untested, unregulated, unlicensed product that literally looks like Skittles and has every color of the rainbow on the label.
Mm.
So again, while I don't think that we should be fighting each other, I think there needs to be some sort of come to Jesus with the hemp and cannabis industry.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of people that are preaching that, and any pushback to that through the killing of bills or suing against regulations, it's made the landscape really challenging. And so what we are facing is, as Anna Ray pointed out, are, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, these potential bans, which I just think bans in general don't work. And to your point, we need common sense regulation that protects the consumer. But despite these headwinds, despite someone being right next door to you, you have been able to grow your business, and quite rapidly. You've gone from 2 employees up to over 350 in a pretty short amount of time. So, as a CEO, I'm curious more around, like, what does that growth feel like? What are the major inflection points? How rapid was it? Like, how did you keep your head on straight as you scaled well beyond what you could personally wrap your arms around?
Yeah, it's been eating, sleeping, and breathing this for the last almost decade now to get to where we are. And I think that's one of the things that people don't really see is all the behind the scenes things that go into this. I've been fortunate enough to really meet some great people in this industry, folks who've been wildly successful in other industries. And the resounding theme when I talk to those guys, and I consider a lot of them mentors and good friends, is this is the hardest industry that they've ever operated in. And these are coming from serial entrepreneurs who've ran multiple different businesses across multiple regulated industries, and just figuring all of this out. A cannabis company right now is like 7-8 businesses in one, from having to set up an inventory management system to a logistics service, retail, manufacturing, the list goes on, real estate, etc. And when you add all of these regulations on top, and people figuring out what these regulations mean and how they're gonna roll out practically, it creates a very difficult environment. So I'd say number one is being there, You got to show up every single day. You've got to keep up with the news. You've got to keep up with the relationships in your market and really understand what's going on at the ground level so you can pivot if things don't go your way. Um, I think back to scaling, to start scaling, you read all these books and have all these ideas about what leadership is and what scaling a company should look like. But I think everybody has their own journey to scaling a company. And we've made so many mistakes in building Show Me Organics. And um, that's not to say that we could go back and build it again. I kind of use the analogy. It's like a round of golf. Whether you hit a shot in the woods or you missed a putt or you hit a good putt, like you got to show up and hit the next shot and play it where it lies. So I think scaling a company really starts with scaling your decision quality before the head count. So, in the early stages when it was me in Montana, really doing everything from I was doing the sales and marketing and the pop-ups at the stores and running the retail team. And Montana was making the products, doing R&D, testing these products, getting our packaging figured out, getting the supply chain figured out, and actually delivering them to the stores. So early stages, you're able to win with talent, density, and just a sheer hustle. That feedback loop was so close then. We only had a dozen employees, and we were driving most of the decisions in the company. So that feedback loop was really close. So if something went wrong or a store got a wrong delivery, I'd call Montana, we'd fix it. We'd have an answer before the end of the day. When you get into a growth stage company and really start to scale, one of the biggest things I've learned, as this is my first company that's grown to this stage, is you win with clarity and process accountability. So as that feedback loop gets bigger, as you add more stores, more production capacity, more employees, you've really got to have a clear accountability structure on who's doing what. Roles can't be unclear. You've got to empower your leaders. And, as the founder, one of the hardest things for me is like, you can't be in every single decision. So we found a couple of good tools in scaling the company. We've worked with EOS to create a structure and kind of tailored that to our own personal leadership meeting. But it only works if your team is bought in and your leaders own the outcomes. You got to have A players who can run the lanes without you. And again, the hardest part of that is letting people fail without stepping in too early and fixing things every single time. Otherwise, you're going to continue to run into those problems and continue to have to step in and fix. And that doesn't allow me to focus on our biggest growth initiatives to get the company where ultimately we want to be.
Yeah. EOS is great. I'm kind of digging into the book Traction again. It was sitting up on the shelf, and after we talked last week, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go pull that thing off and dust it off and see how we're performing on the accountability scale.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I just like anything, it's not perfect. You've got to make the framework perfect. So we've adapted it to our needs and made what I think is a pretty efficient EOS structure across all of our organizations and entities. But granted, it's still a work in progress. Like every day, there's something new or decisions that you're having to change or fix. And I always use another analogy that is these companies are like big ships, especially in cannabis. When you make a decision to turn, you should be going that way for a long time because it takes 6 to 9 months to turn it around.
Yeah. Amen.
Ooh, you just set me up so hard for my perfect segue into talking about Kentucky. It sounds like you turned the ship into Kentucky, and I want to talk about it because this is a market that is very limited in its licensing. It's brand new. It's pretty constricted in terms of what's around, allowed from a form factor perspective. But I know that you are looking at this as a brand new market that you get to get in there as a first mover. This is the beginning. I'm sure you have hopes and dreams of what this market will become. Is this going to be the next Missouri for Show Me Organics? Tell me about Kentucky.
Kentucky's a really interesting market. I think we share a lot of similarities in Missouri to Kentucky. One being what we just talked about. Those Kentuckians are prideful in their state. They really like supporting local Kentucky businesses and making sure that their constituents are able to have a fair shot at markets. So in Kentucky, we have a management company called Trilux KY Management, and we've used that structure to partner with different business owners, license owners, and bring kind of our expertise from Missouri and our brands that we've built to Kentucky to try to put into the best practices for that state in particular. So currently, we have a 10,000 square foot cultivation canopy that we're operating. That's in Jessamine County in Nicholasville. We were one of the first few cultivators to market. Don't quote me on exactly which number, but I believe 3 or 4. And we're not close to capacity right now, as that patient count is hovering around 18 or 20,000 currently. But we really do believe that with the things that the regulators are putting in place, they're trying to work with us to make the process from getting your certification to a card a bit easier on patients. As you guys know, a lot of folks who need this medical cannabis are elderly patients who may not be as well versed on the Complia websites and going to get a notary and digitally uploading those documents. So I think there's definitely a few barriers that we have to overcome, and we're expecting to have to overcome. But all in all, it's a new market. I'm super excited for it. It brings me back to 5 years ago when we were getting things off the ground here. And I can't wait to see what the market looks like a year from today. I believe by the end of the year, we'll be in a good spot with 40 to 50,000 patients is our goal. And we'll have several dispensaries that we're operating in Kentucky, and mostly in the rural areas, but we've got a couple outside of Lexington.
Do you think that the restrictions on form factors are going to keep people out of the dispensaries?
Partially. It's similar to Ohio in regulation. You can't have oil over 70% Delta 9 THC, or any product over 70% Delta 9 THC. And flour, I believe, is at 35% Delta 9 THC. So it is non-combustible, although I don't think that stopped anybody in Ohio. But I believe that one of the things that is hindering the patient count right now, outside of the difficulties in uploads and going from certification to approved card, is just variety out on the market. There's only 1 or 2 brands currently in Kentucky. You've got one product of gummies. We're just receiving FICO at some of the stores this week, and then flour. And there's one brand, and again, supply and demand dictates pricing. So, pricing and variety are a big part of what is needed to normalize the Kentucky industry.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of the conversation we were having last weekend, Ray. Just with these conservative states, how they start highly restrictive and then progressively get better over time. We've seen it in Texas with the recent legislation. Georgia just passed their law that we talked about last week, so opening up the market there. And so this is that kind of first step for Kentucky. So hopefully we see a lot more than that 18 to 20,000. I think it's also interesting, we have some really key, federal legislators that are out of Kentucky. Obviously Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, but James Comer, and to now have cannabis represented in their with their constituents, slowly progressing that very difficult conversation in DC. Boston, I'm curious, working now across 2 states and maybe more in the future, um, is this driving you to get involved in the political conversations like in these states, or is your lens more of, playing the ball as it lies? You mentioned being a CEO and adapting. Um, how do you see like the importance of that aspect, like changing the laws in Kentucky to be more open?
Yeah, I'm very, very involved on that front, and I think as a potential industry leader in Kentucky, uh, it's up to us to make sure that these regulators understand the rules that they're putting forth and what that practically looks like downstream.
Mhm.
Just like in Missouri, there's a lot of things that start off one way, but once these guys see how it works out practically, they understand why it doesn't make sense in the industry. So, like you mentioned earlier, the conservative states with legislation, they don't like to change anything right away because the certain process was put forth to enact the legislation that the voters voted on, and they don't want to change anything too early. Uh, More of a scientific method approach, change one thing at a time and see exactly what the ramifications of that are. So I do
Hmm.
think we will get there, but it is going to take a strong industry association, just like any state, and these operators getting together and making sure that we're able to effectively, cordially communicate our problems to the regulators.
Cordially, I like that.
I want to talk about capital and your vision for what you're trying to build ultimately. You started this as a family business, but you've talked about how you're building scale and how you're looking at the market. In order to launch in a new state and to expand at the rate that you have, I'm sure that you've had to raise capital. And I think that it would be really helpful to hear your story about how you embarked on raising capital and how successful it's been, what has been your approach, and ultimately what you're trying to build with this private MSO that is really kind of coming into its own in some of the markets and people are paying attention to.
Yeah. Yeah, the old adage, mo money, mo problems. That
Yeah.
is that is our core thesis in capital, honestly. Is capital doesn't solve your problems, it really amplifies them. And I think early mistake a lot of founders make is chasing the valuation instead of alignment. And what you really need to do is get your house in order before you go and raise capital. Otherwise, you can very easily get taken advantage of in these types of markets. And a lot of these investors who are willing to take these risky investments in cannabis are well versed in other investments. So they know what a good deal looks like to them. They know what a bad deal looks like for the founder. So I think it's very important to have your house in order and make sure that you know exactly where you're going to deploy that capital before you bring it in. The first round that we raised was pre-application in Missouri. It was a merit-based scoring application, so you had to show your sources of capitalization and where all that was from. So we did a friends and family round just to get through that initial application period and at least have the statements of those investors that we were able to show the state to show that we were qualified applicants. We really from there tried to bootstrap as much as possible. When I say as much as possible, I'm going back to like Montana driving the vans to these dispensaries to deliver the first orders and us in there helping with construction and making sure that we knew exactly every dollar that went out of the organization, what the value it was generating. I think that going back to that early mistake a lot of founders make is you can go raise at a fairly high multiple or a fairly high valuation in an investment like this if you have a good business plan and a thesis. But if you don't really attribute those dollars to value and what you're going to get out of them, I think it's a lost cause to do so. So our philosophy has really been to be disciplined. don't overbuild too early. As I mentioned, in Kentucky, we have our 10,000 square foot cultivation right now, but we're only operating a couple of rooms, a couple of small rooms right now, and haven't even pushed play on building out the phase 2 and 3 of that cultivation operation. So phase capital into uncertainty, and then the structure, like I said, is much more important than the headline valuation. So after we raised that initial seed round, that was enough to get our first 2 dispensaries off the ground and complete our first acquisition of a manufacturing lab in Missouri. We operated those for about 6 months before we really determined the need to get vertically integrated. We were ordering biomass from all of these different cultivators in the state, and that inherently brings some risk into your process because you don't know how that material's been grown, what type of care they took on those plants. So early on, we faced a couple of capital events that put us in a really tough spot when you run $300,000 of material into a product that part of it or all of it fails and has to be remediated. You have to really make a big pivot there. Thankfully, we have good processes and procedures in the lab, and my brother's background being in academia, we try to approach it with that scientific method of never too much risk out there. But when we realized we needed to get vertically integrated, I was out raising capital and looking at about every cultivation in the state of Missouri. License, built, didn't matter. So we went to several of these different cultivations that were open. They initially licensed 60 cultivators in Missouri. I'd say I went around to 30 of them to talk acquisitions and seeing if anybody was interested in a partnership. And everybody wanted to go at it alone or had their own plan at that time. So I not only got a lot of no's on the acquisition side, but we really ran into a lot of no's on the capital raise side. We had to raise a substantial amount of capital to complete the holistic acquisition in 2022. And I went to everybody I know, everybody my brother knows, everybody my brother's friends know, like every single person in our network, we went and tried to raise capital. And I probably got 200 to 300 no's because it was too big of a project or investors didn't really understand it. Thankfully, we did have some people from our initial investor group who saw the vision. They were willing to take the risk on us. And then I found a couple of guys outside of that investor stack who really believed in what we were doing here. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in pitching that many people is you can have the perfect business plan. You can have everything teed up, but the person giving you a check really has to believe in you and your leadership team as the founders if they are going to get that far in the process.
It's interesting that you discovered that you needed to vertically integrate, and then you went and purchased the grow and did that. And then it sounds like going into Kentucky, that is now the foundation where you built the canopy. And then I presume that you will then vertically integrate and create the similar model that you have in Missouri. Is that how you're looking at it as you go into these other markets? And if you want to inform us on any other thing that's on the horizon, but is that now the model where you go in and you build the grow and then kind of like work downstream from that?
Yeah, I think it's like anything. The best way to learn is to do. Mm-hmm. And now that we've done in one state, not only do I have a little better know-how of how this process works, but investors have a bit more trust in what we've done here and being able to recreate that platform in another state, whether it be Kentucky or another market. So now that gives us the benefit of being able to have this capital teed up for expansion when it makes sense. So again, going back to having your pulse on the ground, I'm going to be very, very close to the ground in Kentucky. And we've got a great team down there right now who's also really helping get those patient drives set up, inform us of any pinch points in the market, and really be on the ground floor of knowing when we need to build out to capacity and expand. So yeah, that's a huge lift. And I think some of my constituents here in Missouri is really who I learned from. Those people who got off the ground early, had good quality, reliable product from the start of medical, and just got better as patient count increased, and eventually we went recreational.
Hmm.
So leaning into this medical to adult real life experience that you've had in Missouri, and now that you're watching Kentucky, there's not that many medical only markets left. There are some states that don't even have a medical program. But in terms of those early entrant markets, what states are you watching, and what states would you like to be a part of?
Yeah, so always love a new market. Like I told you, it brings me back to the startup days, and being able to go down and make a difference with just sheer hustle. So I think our team's really well built for that, and really our bread and butter. So we are looking actively at new markets. We try to go for limited license markets where we know there will be good, solid regulation, hopefully a chance of going adult use in the future. And the current one that we have on the horizon is we applied for the third round of Texas TCUP licenses that should come out any day now. So we submitted back in September. They awarded 9 licenses in December from a previous application period. And then there are 3 more applications or licenses that will be awarded here in April. So very excited for the prospect of Texas, and crossing our fingers there.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you.
As we kind of get closer to the top of the hour, I can't help but think like you just mentioned that being elated by kind of that startup phase, and you came out of biochemistry and jumped into building startups in cannabis, and I want to take us back to that moment of jumping in, and like what made you decide to leave biochemistry, which is a very specific focus, and to jump into something as crazy as building companies in cannabis.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll take it back a couple of years prior when I realized biochemistry wasn't really the path I wanted to go. Um, I've always had a passion for cannabis. I've seen how it can help, my friends, family, and uh, communities around us. So it's been a passion of mine since I realized I'd been lied to when I was about 18 years old and tried cannabis for the first time. So my sophomore year at Mizzou, I went on a great study abroad trip. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to China for about 5 months, did an internship and a study abroad program there, and had a really good mentor from the MBA program at Mizzou. His name was Bill Griffin. And I was going through my life problems with him basically, and told him I didn't see a fit in biochemistry. And he sat me down and told me, Boston, hold on for a second, get your technical degree. If you still want to go the entrepreneurship route, you can go back and get your MBA. And that's what I ended up doing. So about my sophomore, junior year, I started getting involved into startups and entrepreneurship, worked for a couple really cool startups. One that was behind the eye glaucoma implant called Sclera. Worked with a couple of doctors and research teams at the University of Missouri to go through drug trials and get that medical device to market. Funny enough, there was a bit of crossover between cannabis and glaucoma, obviously reducing the pressure from that. So that got me thinking a bit about the business side. And then I was involved in a couple more startups beyond that, a logistics startup, and a couple of restaurant payment processor startups, and really just opened my eyes into what it's like to lead a team and try to build something from the ground up. And I fell in love with it. So my brother worked at MD Anderson for a while in Houston, and he was doing cancer research. So when I had the idea to apply, I actually got it brought to me through my parents, and it's a complete family business. So my mom's a pharmacist. That's why my brother and I went into biochemistry and thought we wanted to go that direction. But funny enough, my dad's friend actually brought this process to us because he knew a consultant that was working on it in Missouri, and they brought it to me, and I took off with it. Like that was all I was going to do. I had a sidebar with Montana, and he had a good thing going at the time, and we weren't either one real sure about the direction, but we knew we wanted to try it. So in 2018, we went to our first MJ BizCon and met some of the folks in the industry. Shortly before that, actually, we moved Montana out to Denver to get experience in the extraction side of things. We always knew we wanted to build a brand, just didn't really know how we were going to get into the industry. We didn't know anybody at the time. So he started as a lab tech at M. Hardeen in Denver, or right outside of Denver in Golden, and worked his way up to one of their head extraction technicians fairly quickly. I worked out there for about 2 years while we were waiting on the application from Missouri. So when we didn't get our license approved for manufacturing, we were crushed, but that didn't stop us. We continued to pivot, went and acquired a manufacturing lab, and we're one of the first brands and manufactured products to market in Missouri. And one last thing on that, a big shout out to Montana, my brother. He's one of the first and few people who I believe in the cannabis industry really marries the culture and what cannabis has always been about for decades to the academia and science that really needs to marry these two to make us a legitimate industry in the eyes of all these other constituents. So really happy with kind of how the chips fell, I guess, but never dreamed that I would be fortunate enough to be able to be in the cannabis industry, waking up and doing this every day.
That's amazing. I love that.
I have goosebumps. You can't see them, but it is so fun to just get to hear people's stories, and so appreciative of how much you've shared with us. And I want to meet Montana now, so you'll have to introduce us to him. It is the end of the hour, so it's time for our last call. So Boston Dickerson, what's your final message to leave our listeners with? Advice, call to action, or a closing thought? The mic is yours.
Yep. Closing thought. I just want to give one last shout out to the whole team at Show Me Organics. None of what we're doing would be possible without the buy-in of everybody from our leadership team down to the associates that take so much care in producing some of the best products in the Midwest. So big shout out to those guys, and we're just getting started.
Awesome. Well, shout out to you. Boston Dickerson, CEO of Show Me Organics. Thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. It was really great chatting with you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, guys. Thanks a lot for having me.
All right. What do you think, everyone? Show me the money. Go out and get some products if you're in Missouri or Kentucky now, I guess. And we'll be watching Boston and Montana and see how they continue to grow this business. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, share, do all the things. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. As always, folks, stay curious, stay informed, and keep your spirits high. Until next time, that's the show.